Our guest is Sarah Fowler Arthur. She is state representative for the 99th District, and she was with us last week, and I was looking at all the stuff I wanted to cover, and I knew 30 seconds on some very important things wasn't going to make it, so I asked her to hang on and we would do another show. So thank you, Sarah.
Well, thank you for having me back, Bob. We do. We have so many bills at the moment, and I really appreciate the time to share about them.
Yeah, and we've talked about COVID a lot the last show. There are other COVID relief packages that dealing with rent and utilities and small businesses and veterans and county fairs and child care, and probably a whole lot more. And I imagine the average person that may benefit from this doesn't know anything about it. Can you kind of talk about that?
Well, there have been a lot of relief packages that have gone through the legislature in the last 2 months, and most of them have passed the House. I'm actually not sure if the majority of them have made it through the Senate process yet, but they have been around all the things you mentioned: reopening county fairs, making sure that outdoor events can take place this summer, making provisions for businesses that have been fined, and we have a bill that is going through the State and Local Government Committee, which I sit on at the moment, that is looking into refunding the fines that businesses have received that were solely related to the COVID-19 mandates. And one of the reasons for that is because businesses were being fined for things that their customers did without their permission. And so even if they asked someone to not do something that violated one of the pandemic rules, if a health inspector was there at the time and the person didn't comply, we found that businesses were still fined, and in some cases it is endangering their ability to hold a liquor license or a restaurant license. And so there's been some investigation into whether or not we need to relieve those sanctions so that businesses that were already hit hard by the pandemic have the opportunity to continue serving the public in the coming year, as hopefully those restrictions and pandemic regulations are lifted. And we know that a lot of businesses and families have really struggled to make ends meet and to be viable this year. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to make sure that if someone was injured by those regulations, that it is that they have as many means as possible to recover and move forward strongly. Another thing that we're looking into is unemployment fraud. I don't know if you've spoken with County Auditor David Thomas recently or not, but they found that in Ashtabula County alone, about 10% of the county employees' names and identities have been stolen and used for fraudulent unemployment applications. And we've seen this statewide, where many people had unemployment fraud conducted against them.
My wife was one of them.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at a bill. I'm co-sponsoring a bill with Representative Diane Grindell from the 76th District that would audit the entire process of unemployment and make sure that those who received the funds were actually supposed to receive the funds, and that those who stole an identity are appropriately prosecuted. Because unfortunately, the result was the system became so burdened with people fraudulently applying that those who legitimately had worked and needed assistance sometimes had to wait 10, 12, 15 weeks before getting their first check, and that's not acceptable. So we want to find out what the issue was and correct it for any future needs, and make sure that those who've used it wrongly are appropriately prosecuted.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked on that, because my wife got something, for tax reasons, saying she got so much money from unemployment. And she didn't get any money from unemployment, and we didn't know anything about it until she got that notice. And I would have thought that there would be multiple attempts to verify, and letters and different things.
Yeah. There were a lot of attempts, but they now, if you can verify your identity online with your Social Security number or your tax statement or some other means of identification, then they kind of view it as you've already checked all those identification boxes and you create a PIN number and all this stuff with your account. It's actually one of the reasons that I have significant concerns with a bill that would allow for online voter registration absentee applications, because they want to verify with two forms of identity, but we've already seen in this unemployment situation for the last year where that can be abused. And so I'm just pretty hesitant about making it less accurate in who might be able to request an absentee ballot without a signature verification by the Board of Elections.
Okay, yeah. And your husband is on the Board of Elections?
That's correct, yes. He is on the Board of Elections and actually recently was appointed as the chairman, and they successfully were able to pull off the spring election here, the May.
Right.
Right, and that's a nice thing to have checked the box and moved on from, but it definitely helps with some of these election bills to have somebody to go to, hey, what would this actually do
right.
to the county if it passed?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a couple other bills, if you don't mind, that I'd like to share.
Sure.
One I was supposed to be giving testimony on in the Transportation Committee this past week. It's House Bill 231, and this is one I'm sponsoring due to constituent concerns in Geneva. Basically, during the pandemic, the Bureau of Motor Vehicles increased the number of hours that used car dealers had to serve the public from 2 hours a week to 25 hours a week. And they mandated that 10 of those be between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. And as we all know, many of those small dealerships had children that were home from school that they needed to be with, or they were taking care of other family members, and it created a real hardship, because if you don't post those hours and spend the time at your actual vehicle location, you can lose your dealership license, or if you are prosecuted, it is a fourth-degree misdemeanor. So I am introducing legislation that would remove the hours of operation requirement and allow dealers other means of consumer protection verification, but would really allow them more flexibility in how they serve the public, not just during a pandemic, but going forward, whether they want to do appointment only or whether they want to set their own hours but not have it dictated to them from the state.
So you had a constituent come to you with this problem. Is that how you became aware of it?
Actually, several constituents reached out and said this had been a real hardship for them. The gentleman that reached out from Geneva actually sells museum-quality muscle cars, and his business is very unique, but it still would have had to meet those same requirements. And I don't think it's a very common thing for you to have a museum collector coming in every day. So he was very concerned that it would put him out of business because of the number of hours that he'd have to sit at the location instead of out looking for other vehicles or getting the vehicle detailed or repaired, or
right.
kind of other important business tasks.
Sometimes state government does things to impede businesses, and that needs to be corrected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a real focus of this particular General Assembly. We have, I believe, about 60 members that are participating in a Business First Caucus, which is basically bringing in guest speakers and talking about how can Ohio become more business friendly, because we're ranked kind of in the lower middle of the pack for all 50 states, and we would really like to see us move up to be in the top 10 states that are business friendly and incentivize new businesses and business growth in the area.
Let's switch gears a little bit, and broadband expansion. There are parts you go south on Route 7 past Pierpont into Richmond Township, and there is no internet, not only cell phone, but there are no lines,
Right.
And it's a real problem. And somebody I'm sure has talked before about having to drive to Andover and sit in the McDonald's parking lot to do work. That's crazy.
I know quite a few families in the Andover area and the Pierpont, Richmond corridor there that really have no access to high-speed internet, and it's kind of a big infrastructure problem that was underscored and emboldened during the pandemic because it became essential for your K-12 education, your higher education, doing business, medical, telehealth visits.
Well, I understand that farmers sometimes, they have high-tech equipment and they need things examined and whatever, and they need the internet there to help them make decisions right away out in the field.
It can be. I think, and my grandfather lives in Northwest Ohio, and they've even gone to some GPS-run equipment where you do have need of that. I think that often runs more off the cell towers, at least the system that they're using, but the internet has been a significant concern, and you don't get the high speed that you're looking for necessarily through cell towers. I think that was one of the things I learned as we were working through this broadband expansion bill. And what House Bill 2 does is it funds last mile fiber optic cable. So it incentivizes through a grant process businesses like Windstream or there's a variety of other providers in different areas of the state that are trying to service those customers in hard-to-reach places and helps them to put that infrastructure in place at an affordable rate. And I was very pleased to support that, and it passed the Senate a couple weeks ago, and I believe on Tuesday this week that the governor signed that into law. So at the present time, there's a budget appropriation of several $1 million in House Bill 110 that would fund the project, and I expect that we'll see some movement on that after the budget passes in the end of the month, end of June.
Now, I was told by some people that live there that even the cell towers don't work well there. And, sometimes you can go to a library and get a little thing that will give you internet, like a portable gizmo, and they don't work out there either. So, I mean, they're in bad shape.
They really need fiber optic cables in order to get the kind of internet that the rest of us enjoy in other parts of the county. And there's actually a federal requirement now for how they test the quality of your internet. So it was specified within the House Bill 2 that it's going to have to meet those federal minimum requirements for what's considered high-speed internet. And I'm not going to recall the specific numbers right off, but it's an ever-changing number because the rest of the world is increasing their connectivity rapidly, and that raises the bar for everyone else, and in some ways leaves people who don't have internet access further and further behind the modern age.
We have just a few seconds left. You are also on the Agriculture and Conservation Committees, Armed Services, Veterans Affairs, Primary and Secondary Education. We don't have time to go into it, but it sounds like you've got a lot of good committees that you're on.
Well, I was very thrilled to receive almost every committee assignment that I requested. Those are my areas of background, and we just love to interact with any constituents that have questions. They can check us out on Ohio.
Okay, we got to go, but if they need to contact you, Sarah Fowler Arthur, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm Bob Lebzelter on Perspectives.